Hi, I'm Mark Tucker,
And I'm Alan Furstenberg. Welcome to Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs.
How's it been
Well,
going, Mark?
Alan, it's been okay. It's been I don't know. It's been a crazy week, but good. How about you? What's going on your side?
Crazy but good week here as well. I've been working on a new release for multivocal since Dialogflow seems to have just released something new. So we'll be talking about that in the future, I'm sure. But it's
Yeah,
been keeping me
I'm
busy.
curious about that. Just you tack on a few extra letters at the end of Dialogflow, and it's new.
It's brand new. Almost doesn't resemble the old Dialogflow and bears striking similarities to Actions Builder. But we'll talk about that another time, once I dig into it a little bit more.
The same but different. Well, I've been thinking about on a number of the different projects that I'm doing for work or personally, um, about displays, about whether it's on like a mobile phone or on a smart display, uh, what would be the Echo Show or Fire TV on the Alexa side of things, or what is just the Samsung phone for Bixby or whatever. So just thinking about all the different display technologies and kind of how they've changed over the years.
Well, how they change over the years, but also how they fit into a voice first platforms, which all of these
Exactly.
are. So we like to say that voice first doesn't mean voice only.
Right.
But what does it mean, and how do those fit in? So what's Alexa's history on this sort of thing?
Oh man. Okay. So I joined the whole developer experience on Alexa in 2016, and I'm going by memory here, so I'm hoping that I get this right. And the only thing available at that time, as far as showing anything on a screen, was there was this Alexa app that you used to set up your device, but you could also send cards to that. To your mobile phone, and I guess to a certain extent to the web. I don't know if there was a web version of Alexa back then. But
now when you say send the cards to the phone, that's when you were talking to an Echo speaker, it could send cards to the phone, or
yeah. So you're invoke your skill, and you're using this thing, and maybe you're wanting to send some details, like you found something and you want the details of that. You could have, as part of the response coming back from Alexa, besides the text to speech, was this additional information for a card that you could send to the Alexa app. Now you'd have to announce in the SSML that you were going to be sending a card, so people even knew to look, because there's no way that they would know. And you have two different cards. You could send a simple card, which was just text, or a standard card, which was a text plus image. But that's all it was. It's read-only. There's no hyperlinks. There's no buttons. It's a little piece of information that you can share with the user while you're interacting with that. And so then they could go to the Alexa app and see whatever the details was. Let's say that it was a recipe. I don't know. I think a recipe was probably beef and too big for the amount of text that you could have on one of these cards. But anyway, there's additional cards that, as well as if you're going to do account linking, you could send an account linking card to the Alexa app, where they could go in and help link up some sort of a website account to your Alexa skill. Or there's permissions, so you can go into your typical into the skills page, to the detail, and set any permissions that you might need, whether it was reminders or notifications. Those didn't exist at the time, but contact them, whatever the permissions were, you could send a card to the Alexa app. That would be a way where they could then click on that card and get to the details or whatever they needed to do to change those. So that's where things were in 2016. You roll around to I think it's about June probably of 2017, the Echo Show comes out. And so now you've got displays. So then the question was, what do you do with those skills that have cards? Well, they automatically upscaled those cards for you.
Did they?
They did, but I don't know, it didn't work super great, and there wasn't a lot of information there. But then they presented some additional templates, and they called them display templates or render templates. And it was at that time where you had 5 detail templates and 3 list templates, plus the audio player and video player that you could customize a little bit. But it was basically, here is this standardized screen and these values that if you fill in a text here, or if you fill in images or whatnot, then it will render on the screen. But once again, it's very, was mostly static. You could have buttons and you could have a little bit of like HTML type markup, but that was kind of, that was my first foray into it. And I immediately, any skill that we did, that we would go ahead and do render templates just to make sure that we understood how they worked. So, you know, roll around 6 months later and I've done like 200 different screens for the different demos and projects that I'm on. And so that's where render templates come in. And so those would render on different devices. And at that time it was the Echo Show and the Echo Spot, which was the round one. So that's kind of where render templates come in.
Now, what did a render template look like? Was it JSON based again, or a text based where you filled stuff in, or what did it kind of look like?
Yeah, it was just, you would just fill in the values, and it would just, you'd see in the code that, here's a sample, and you could copy and paste that code, and just fill in whatever the values were. So so that's what happened with render templates. And then this thing called Alexa Presentation Language came out. And the idea with Alexa Presentation Language is we're thinking about, okay, there's lots of different devices that are out there, and I think more and more and more. And for whatever reason, at that pivot point, they decided that they were going to go ahead and go with a new technology as opposed to try to use something like web. And so they Amazon invented this whole thing called Alexa Presentation Language, which we've talked about, I think, a little bit or mentioned before. It's template based, it's JSON, it's got styles and components and conditionals where you can turn things on or off. You have a document that you return, plus it's got a data section where you can do data binding to values. And there's just a whole bunch of things that you can do, but you've got primitives like a button or an image or text or things like that, and then they're expanding more and more this idea of having more compound components, like here's the typical header that you would see in an Alexa skill screen, or here's the footer, or here's a background image, or a list scroller. And so there's more and more. But I guess the challenge is one, the learning curve is a lot more. So like when I was doing a screen in display templates, I could do something in 10 or 20 lines of code just by filling in placeholder values, and I'd get something that was okay on the screen. But then if I do the same thing in APL, since I've got to do everything from scratch, it's like 300 lines. So
wow, that is.
It is quite good. You've got the whole section that you're the same concepts that you have on the web, right? You've got the structure of the document, which would be like the HTML, and that would be the JSON portion of it, that describing your layout. And you've got components that then you could put in components, but setting values. You've got styles, so you can set colors and different things. Yeah, they've rewritten it. So like if you wanted to have an SVG, it's not a typical SVG, it's an AVG, it's an Alexa vector graphic. So they've had to rewrite a subset of SVG to be able to support, and then you have to like convert from SVG into AVG to show that in APL.
I think what I find amazing is that this is a very, very niche technology, and yet we've got a bunch of people that are doing some amazing stuff with it still.
Yes, I've definitely seen some amazing things, and the challenge is that there are a handful of primitives, and now we're, I think, at APL 1.4, which is, we've got more things, but then you've got these composite components that are higher order, made up of these smaller primitives, but there isn't like a control vendor out there. I remember doing web or anything in the past. You'd go and you'd do a search and you would find some control vendor library that had a whole suite of controls that you liked, and then you would get that and use it. But there was just last month at Alexa Live an announcement for a website. A few people have gotten together and created APL themes, and so it's a website where they make and sell themes, and I'm hoping like in the future it would be like more of a marketplace where those that are really talented at doing APL could create these themes and then sell them.
That's good, because that's the sort of thing that you need, is just to be able to say, take this theme and plug it in and feed in the values that you need. This also gives you, a bunch of consistent user interfaces. I mean, on the website, we saw this with things like, jQuery for a while, and then Bootstrap, and then, some others, so that you're getting these consistent expected usability feels. So, everyone knows that when you click on a calendar icon, it looks like a they all look more or less the same.
Yeah, and so there are, I'm sure there are developers out there that love display technologies and want to be designers of layouts and components for the UI, and more power to them. Love those guys. But a lot of people, especially in the voice world, you just want to get something done, right? And you don't want to have to invest a whole bunch of money, either developer time, if it's something that's going to take me 300 lines of code, something that might have taken an hour might take me a day to do, and that day has developer costs to it.
And it's get something done, but also get something done that looks decent and looks consistent. Because you don't, one of the things you don't want is for your skill to look and feel and work so radically different than Alexa's first party skills.
Exactly.
You want some variation, and it's always good to see people who are kind of pushing the envelope, but you don't want these things that feel so different that the user coming into it says, what am I supposed to do here? I'm lost.
Yeah. So, and I'm not sure what the pricing is on APL themes. I think I heard somebody look at it once and like, $100? I can't believe this has cost $100. And I'm like, how many developer hours is $100? It's not much.
If it's a good theme and it's got nice hooks that you can use that are well documented and all of that stuff that really goes into it, 100 is pretty cheap. I know you can if you buy Bootstrap themes, for example, some of those are a lot more.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's new ground. People that are used to getting things for free. I think on the Alexa developer side of things, we're starting to see. Well, and I think that's healthy. If there is an ecosystem where people can make money doing it, it bodes well for the ecosystem as a whole.
Yeah, agreed.
So totally. Hats off to the APL themes team, doing awesome work. Keep going. People support them. We need them. They're pioneers in this. There's no other place that you can go to do things like that. It's roll your own is the only other option. And
agreed. So now I know last time we talked about a specialty APL audio. Are there other specialty APLs out there?
Yes. And so it's interesting. APL came out, and I think APL was targeted specifically for displays. But then I think there's a lot that they liked in APL. This is my take on it. I haven't talked to anybody directly, but because it's templating and because you get data binding and conditionals, and there's just those whole layers upon layers of things that you get with APL, then I think that's why they chose to use it for audio as well. Because now you're just doing audio components, and now presentation isn't specifically meaning display presentation. It means presentation of audio. But there is another APL, and it's APL-T, which is APL for text.
Okay, where do we see this?
Well,
I'm afraid I know the answer.
so there is a very unique device called the Echo Dot with clock. So the Echo Dot is, the smaller Echo, and it's been around, and it's been redesigned, so it's got a better look than the hockey puck that it used to be. And but there is a variation of it that has a clock in the side, so it's kind of like your new, I don't know, if you don't want a displayed device in your bedroom, it could be your alarm clock now. You can see what the time is just by glancing. You can set alarms, you can see the alarms, but you can also program for it. You could have your own text appear on there. You can have scrolling text go across like a little marquee. So I'm gonna, so
That
it's got
seems
a lot of,
really, really cute.
yeah, it is cute. I think it's nice, but it's quirky because the displays are typical 7-segment displays, and so there's certain things that are hard to write on there. So sometimes the letter, you can do an uppercase or lowercase variation of a letter. You can do all the numbers, of course, right? But letters of the alphabet, you can do, in some cases, both upper and lower, in some cases upper only, or some cases lower only. Or in the cases of K, M, V, W, X, and Z, you do not have those letters at all.
Oh,
So
really? It's really just a 7-segment display. They didn't go with higher.
I know,
Oh
I'm like,
man.
I don't know. How much more expensive is a more advanced display that could do alphanumerics? I don't know, but it is interesting. Yeah. So you can't spell everything out on the,
But you control this using APL.
yeah. So then you have components, and you have, so like you've got your typical container. It's a lot more simpler. There's this concept of a pager on a display where you can put a whole bunch of controls on a pager and then do page 1, page 2, and have it like flip through the different pages. So you can do that same type of concept, but really the thing that you've got is you've got simple text or timer text. So there's not much you can, there's not very many components to APLT. The component library is small, but maybe the next version of Echo Dot with clock will be
Well,
more,
if they upgrade the display, then yeah,
yeah,
maybe.
then I could spell things like zoo, or I don't know, instead of just having it come out ooh, because there's no Z. I don't know. But interestingly, so that's kind of I think that's everything. Really from the technology, the typical Alexa skill technology for displays. But I do want to mention Web API for games. So there is this thing where if you're doing a game, you can get approved to use JavaScript and all your web technologies, HTML and CSS, and do the UI portion using those technologies. And you can do animations. I failed to mention that APL does have animations, which is one of the cool things that you can do with APL as well. But with Web API for games, you can pretty much create a website using different technologies or different JavaScript gaming engines, or whatever you want to do for that. But there are some, it's slow to start up. I think that's one of the reasons why they're not making it available for everything. But it's basically hosting a browser inside of your device and then running JavaScript and
But yeah, there was a
typical
great
web
article.
technologies.
Yeah, there was a great article I saw, I guess it was a couple of weeks ago now, discussing all of these different technologies. And one of the things that highlighted that I wasn't really aware of was that the HTML API for games did have that startup penalty. That was a
Yeah.
pretty significant penalty.
Yeah, so if it's a situation where you want to start because it could be 2 or 3 or 4 seconds, it could be significant. So if it's something where you want to get in and immediately start a conversation, that's not it. But if it's, there is this thought where if you're starting up a game, there is this, getting the pieces out, setting up the board. There is this kind of already this idea of, or even if it's online games, It's this preloading stuff before
Yeah,
you start the game thing. We're used to that.
yeah.
So it doesn't seem like
But in a
quite the
conversation,
penalty
you want
and
that
annoyance.
startup to be faster, and 2 seconds is noticeable when
Yeah, yeah.
you're starting like that. Yeah.
All right. So what's going on the? That was this kind of a quick blast. Well, probably not that quick, but walk through Alexa world. What's going on the Google side of
So
things?
on the Google side, things are a little simpler, and in some sense, there are interesting parallels, but they're different. So we will we'll talk about the fact that it has cards, for example. So right out of the pretty much right out of the gate, they had the ability to send cards back as part of the response. But those cards would only show up on the assistant that you're currently working with. And since they launched out of the gate with the assistant on mobile, if you were talking to the assistant on mobile and you sent a card back, you'd be able to see the card. And cards had as part of it, you can have text with some very, very, very simple formatting, and images, and a link out. So you could have a link from the card to somewhere else. One of the neat things I liked doing with this was, for example, for some mapping applications that I did, it would show the map, and it would pull the image from Google Maps. So it would create a dynamic image based on what you had just said from Google Maps, and then it would give you a link to go directly to Google Maps yourself.
Oh, I like that.
So if you were doing it on the device, you would see this card, and if you were just doing it on a smart speaker, it would ignore it. No problem.
Yeah, so that's an important thing because of the advantage that Android phones were using Assistant as part of the phone experience, that you could be talking to your phone, getting these things shown, these cards shown, and be able to interact and have that be part of the experience. Whereas, Amazon doesn't have that advantage, and so the only mobile experience was, I'm going to interrupt what you're doing and let you know that if you were to go to this mobile app, then
Right.
you would see a card there. It's completely different. One
Right.
is part of the interaction. In fact, you could say something and then see something and respond, and so you could mix this visual and speech interaction and get a more immersive experience.
One of the nice things about that also, and we saw that in some of the other content types they had. So they also have something that they now call a visual selection type. So either a carousel or a list.
Mm-hmm.
And selecting one of these items would return as part of the conversation what you just selected.
Oh, that's nice.
Now,
Yeah,
the other neat bit of that is if you also said one of the items, it would also continue the conversation. So as part of creating the visual list or carousel or collection, whatever they call it now,
mm-hmm.
you are also creating a possible audio response. So the system would figure out which one you did and would kind of present it transparently to you as a developer on our back end. So we didn't have to worry about that too much. We had to worry about it a little, but it would work exactly the same whether I was on a smart speaker or on my phone or eventually on a smart display. So, I could just say, here's the list of options. And if I was on a smart speaker, no, nothing was going to be shown. But if a user then said one of those things,
yes,
it would still pick it up as if you selected an option visually.
Yeah, so just kind of to parallel that with the Alexa, then with display render templates and with APL, you do have the ability to tap the screen or say something, or if you have a list, you can tap a list item, or you can say select number 1 or select pizza, or yes, whatever it is.
Select the first one. Select
but those are actually coded separately. There's like an item selected intent that gets fired.
Yeah,
that tells you what item it is, but it's not the same. It's not the tighter integration where you get back the list of items and it automatically handles both the voice or the touch for that.
So here's the interesting twist on that. Under the previous versions, so before Actions Builder, those would be handled as a special intent type. but either your voice or the touch selection would trigger that intent type.
Okay.
Under Actions Builder, they got rid of this specialty type. So now, no matter whether you touch, and now they're treated as what are called session entity types. So, and we'll be talking about this next week. For reasons we're laughing for reasons we'll explain in a minute, or we'll explain next week. So you can create a session entity type, and that session entity type contains display information sometimes. So if you're displaying it and you touch it, it flags this, it fills that slot with that entity. If you're
Right.
saying it, it fills that slot with the entity. So now we handle everything as if it was like a voice input. It doesn't matter whether it was touch or not. There's
Okay.
also what there are also what they refer to as suggestion chips.
Mhm.
So in a visual display, either on the bottom of a smart display or on the bottom of a phone, you might get these little 10-character almost suggestions of what to type next, or what you can do next.
Well, and that's good because you know, the standard practice or recommendation, or in some cases requirement, I guess even in how long, is that when you're interacting a turn by turn with the assistant, that when the assistant responds, they need to then give you a question that will turn into the next round
Yeah,
of you answering, you know, whether it be like, what do you want to do next, which is open-ended, or do you want to do this, yes or no? And so suggestion chips are perfect because you could take those short answers and give them suggestions on what they
Right.
want to do next.
It's kind of this leading question, you know, these nudges in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Suggestion chips are treated as if they were voice input or typed input. So a lot of people get confused about, well, how do I use a list for this, or do I use a suggestion chip? And kind of the guidance that we give is that suggestion chips are more static. So almost every response, you kind of know where you want to direct the conversation next.
Yes.
So good for things like yes, no, open files, those sorts of things. For lists of files, so if I ask what files do I have, and I would present that as a list rather than as a suggestion, because they're choosing something that's a little more dynamic.
Plus you have a lot more, well, I don't know how much a lot more, but you have more characters that you can just use to render that in a list as opposed to on a suggestion chip.
The lists are actually pretty complete. They let you include graphics. They let you include some very, very simple formatting, you know, bold and italics, basically. Mm-hmm. Also, one of the other cards that was a relatively late addition for the cards is a table card. So a lot of people were trying to create tables
oh wow, that's
using fixed fonts and spacing, and it looked like a mess. But they just
that seemed like that would work very well on a mobile.
No, not the least bit. So they created a table card where you create rows and columns. It's a very basic table. It's just meant to present some simple data, but it works fairly well for a few cases where you need it, and it's a case of a nice specialty card. But we've got nothing like significant animations or major color choices or major things like that. Cards and these visual selectors are really intentionally meant as subordinate to conversation. So they're not meant to overpower.
Yeah, and so this isn't just for the mobile though, right? The same technology would be for the hub and
these are available on all visual devices. So for mobile, for the ones that are on the watch, you get very simplified versions. For the ones that are on mobile, for smart displays, you get slightly larger versions. When you're looking at things like the table, it only guarantees a certain number of rows and columns, but it does show more if you've got larger displays. But for the most part, you've got very little control over how they're displayed. So you can do, actually, I take that back. You can do some overall theming. So you can say, here's the general background color, here's the general font sizes, and fonts that are used and font colors. But that's a theming for the entire action, not for a particular card that's returned.
So it seems like it's not the same, obviously, because it's mobile focused or mobile friendly, definitely, um, and display templates weren't. But it seems like there are a limited number of cards that have abilities. So it seems like it's closer to what rendered templates were.
Probably, yeah.
Cards. Our cards still are very anemic. And nothing's been done with cards really updated since 2016.
It seems like the Alexa cards are most similar to Google's notification technology, which basically sends a notification to your mobile device, and that's exactly where it shows up is as a notification.
But it probably shows up in the notification tray like a normal notification with Alexa's cards. It just shows up in the Alexa app, and you don't know that it's there unless you.
That's odd. I wonder why they chose not to actually send a notification with that, because
that seems like that would be helpful, wouldn't it?
Well, it also seems like they could do it. It's not there. There's no technological limitation there that I can think of.
Yeah, I know that's true. So, do you have anything that's like APL, or is that?
No. I mean, honestly, the closest thing we have that's like APL is the library I've written in multivocal, and that's nothing like APL.
Okay.
APL is the closest that we get actually is what's known as the interactive canvas, which is actually more like HTML API for games.
Yes.
So rather than trying to create a whole new language, they just said, we have Chrome. We have Chrome in all of our devices.
We've got this thing called Chrome, and it's a little bit popular these days.
And every smart display has it built in already. Every mobile phone that we're using has it, sort of.
Right.
Let's just leverage it. I think that's kind of where they went with it is, why reinvent the wheel when there was another team in Google that already reinvented it for them? So.
Yeah. No, is it just for game? Is Interactive Canvas just for games?
Yes, it is. And this is.
Why is that, do you think?
I have no idea. I'll be perfectly honest.
To annoy you?
The biggest reason I think why it's just for games is they're still really trying to assess what the impact of it is. There doesn't seem to be a huge performance impact. It starts up fairly quickly. It seems to be fairly performant even on, smart displays, which are not the most resource, available devices.
Right.
I think mostly they want to prove that it works with, the impression I got was that they want to prove that it works with games, and then at some point just open it up. I think also what they're really afraid of, and I think this is a valid fear, is if they just said immediately it was open up to everyone, then everyone would write web pages and not write voice first apps.
Yeah, I think that is a concern. I can see that where, you don't want to just take what your web experience is and move it over. Games, it makes more sense for, but like just take your web page and put your web page on these devices
it'll end up being a bad experience. And I think it's hard to explain to people why that's going to be a bad experience without without giving them examples why. So I think I understand why they're taking the cautious approach. I'm frustrated by it. I've got a lot of really good applications, some for fun, some more serious, that I think would really benefit by having more of a display, to be honest, there would be a web page that was more controlled by voice. But that's because I think of things as a web page controlled by voice, not a web page that has audio.
Yeah.
So I think that's the big difference. But that's the interactive canvas. The other type that I wanted to mention was what Google refers to as a media player card. So it's kind of like a card. It's built on the same principle as the card responses, but it contains a media player as part of it. And I don't want to go into it now because that gets into comparisons between Alexa, how Alexa does playing media and how Google does playing media, which we'll deal with another time.
Yes, we're already deep into this discussion on displays, and that's true. I did want to bring up just briefly a mention on Bixby
Oh yeah. So
because
I know Bixby's pretty. It's a template like technology basically. So it's
yes,
similar in some ways there.
yeah. So interestingly, like when I started Alexa, then I had an Echo. Well, I didn't even have a device when I first started developing for it, which was an advantage. And then I had an Echo, and then I got an Echo Dot, and now I have the whatever 10, 12 devices that I have today that are varied. But um, when I started out with Bixby, it was already on, the only device was mobile. And so they very much did address the what are you going to do um, for that interaction, kind of that same thing that you can do, the experience that you had on Google with the mobile, where you could have cards and different things where it's interactive. You could talk and you could get a voice response back, plus get something on the display, and you could then choose to select something by speaking or by tapping or looking at things. You can have this multi-varied experience, voice first, but also display augmentation. So that's, they had to address that right from the get-go. So they created templates and then views, and they have what they call cards, but it's their own language as well, where and everything's in .bxb files, which is kind of a weird, kind of YAML-ish, kind of JSON-ish, but not really either. It's their own creation of a syntax
Oh,
in
great.
BXB files. So that part's definitely a learning curve. But you have different types of results. You could have an input result. So when you're talking, you could say something and then input result could come back, and then you could actually input values like by typing or by selecting. There's a result view where this is a result of things that I want to get back, or there's a confirmation view where you can answer yes, no, or something. So there's some different technologies, but there's different cards. So in some ways, it's more like APL, I would think, in the fact that you have these different components. There are a set number of components,
Mm-hmm.
and so you can't really build from primitives to build more and more complex ones. So it's not like that, but it is template based, and it's got conditionals and things.
Now each view can get rendered on a device in a slightly different way. So the view
Yes.
that gets rendered on a mobile will be rendered differently on the refrigerator, which is the example they always give.
Yeah. So that's interesting because they've created their own templating syntax and engine. Then they control how it gets rendered on devices, and they try to make that as smart as possible. And that's one of the things that APL was trying to solve, was this plethora of devices and form factors and screen sizes and things. How do you handle that? And so I think that's Bixby's approach, is that you can write the same response and the display response, and have it show up differently, whether it's on mobile or the fridge or the TV or the watch. And very handily on their website, you can see what it renders at.
Okay, you can preview those. That's nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of, it's amazing that it would seem like this is a solved problem in the past. We thought we understood display technology, and yet here we go down this path again.
After decades of display technology, right?
Yeah.
Then, because I've done desktop, I've done web, I've done what they call smart client. I've done, on Microsoft side of things, Windows Presentation Framework or in Silverlight. And
I've done feature phone web. That had its. Do you remember? There was, again, it was cards. It was building cards for it. I've built cards for glass. You feel like every time we keep having to redo these notions that we had before.
Yeah, and it's interesting because to handle multiple screen formats and stuff on web, then they've got this idea of something being responsive and CSS and things coming into play, and you've got some of that same stuff on like APL, for example, but it's still very much could be like, okay, if I'm on this type of display, like a TV, I've got a lot more real estate. So I want to show more things and pick which things I'm going to show and which things I'm not going to show, as opposed to when it starts getting smaller and smaller to like the 10-inch or the 8-inch or the 5-inch Echo Show devices, then you, instead of just scrunching them and making things smaller, then you can choose what to include and what not to
Yeah.
include. So in some cases it's different, but in some cases it is a redo, and I'm not sure why exactly.
Well, a lot there. I have a feeling we're going to be revisiting this again as new stuff comes out, and stuff's always changing.
Yep. So just to hope you dig in, and we'd love to have your thoughts on what you like or don't like about display technology for voice first.
Or the problems you've encountered, or what your experiences have been, what your success stories have been about making something that's truly voice first and yet also display friendly.
Yeah, no, we'd definitely love to check out some of the work that you guys are doing. So thanks everyone for watching, and we're Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Have a great week, everybody.
Yeah, take care.